to Ideas in Love, Life and Leadership, a conversational exploration into people that inspire me that I want to share with you. And I'm absolutely delighted today, and I hope I'm going to pronounce this properly, to have the beautiful Morag.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Morag,
with me today, Morag, delighted to have you here. Really delighted to have you here. We've got a real special treat for everyone. But before we get to that, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Morag Young. I am a storyteller, and it has taken me a very, very long time to say that phrase. I used to work heavily in corporate for a good number of years, and I was a project manager and a fixer. So I was heavily entrenched in corporate, where we wear really good uniforms, don't we, in very corporate environments, and don't have a very strong identity that we're allowed to present at work. And then over the course of the last few years, I've been doing a lot of personal development work, and I joined the fabulous Kate Wolf's Story School. I was joining because my intention was to try and start my own business. And at the time it was in patient advocacy. And I kind of had this notion of an idea of something that I wanted to do. And I knew that I wanted to do it differently. Kate was running Story School, and her ethos in Story School is about people finding their authentic voice to put out and share with people, so that then people hear that authenticity and they're attracted to it. So I must have started that about 18 months ago, still quite businessy, this is how I'm going to run my business, and I'm doing this course to help me run my business. And then over the course of the weeks and the months, I was like, I'm liking this writing thing. I always used to like writing as a kid. I used to like drama. I was like, haven't done that in a while. A few more months went by, when you try and suppress it a bit. And then after a little while, I think I came to one of the things, and I said to Kate, I think my work might be this work. And she was like, what do you mean? I said, I think I might be a writer and a storyteller. And she was like, at last. I've carried on working with her and starting to develop my own sort of style. And then in about November of last year, I got brave enough to say, I'm gonna put some things out there and see whether people outside my nice little safe space of Story Studio also think this resonates, which is where you heard this story that we're gonna do today. That's the life I'm trying to build, and working with Kate, and we're both very passionate about this finding your voice and speaking your truth, and trying to lose the shoulds and the musts and the the lingo and the stuff that doesn't mean anything, and talk as humans. Even when we're talking about things that we kind of been taught has its own special language, and you must use it because that's how you prove that you've got the qualifications and all that stuff.
And it's beautiful, and as you say, I know Kate as well. I haven't done her story school yet, so I say yet, but I think it's fascinating to hear you talk about how you went into it with a certain idea of what it was going to do for you and your business, and the purpose that it served. And then in that process, and Kate has a magical way of just, like you say, just letting you find it yourself, that at some point then you went, oh, actually this is what it is. It's not at all what I thought it was going to be. And I think that's one of the things that's so wonderful when we go on these personal development journeys, that actually we discover something that is not obvious when we started, and I could just imagine the conversation with Kate when you said, oh, I think I might be this, actually this might be what I'm here to do. Which is just I find so inspirational, and that you were able to drop all of those expectations and say, okay, I'm going to embrace this. And also that thing of finding what we loved as a child, which is something I love to work on with my clients, is let's drop all this conditioning and the life we have led because we took this step and then this step and then this step. Is let's just go back, and when you were a child, what did you love? Another creative genius that I work with, James Victory, talks about what made you weird as a kid. What was the thing that made you weird, which probably you've spent the rest of your life unlearning to not be that weird kid. But actually, if you revisit it, that's your magic, that's your thing. Did you write lots? You said you loved writing as a kid. Did you write lots of stories then? Did you, were you performing in school plays and things?
Yeah, I was performing in school plays, and the last time I performed on stage, so after that lockdown reading, I think one of the people who was in the audience said, "Oh, what's your theatrical training?" And I was like,
wow.
School play when I was 16.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I used to always keep a note of poems that I liked and quotes that I liked, and I was a really avid reader. But it was only when I went back that I realized I used to love getting the manuscripts of plays and reading them out loud. And I would often be one of these kids who, if you left me on my own, if you walked in, you'd find me standing up, kind of almost talking to myself. And I definitely used to sort of create these worlds and have conversations. And I still do that now. And interestingly, I've noticed that that's part of what I do when I'm writing. So I've been writing a story this week on legacy. And my husband now is getting used to my process, because there's a point on the dog walk where there's silence. He's like, "You're thinking about your story, aren't you?" And I'm like moving my, and I'm like, "Yeah," and I'm moving my hands. He's like, "It's like you're having a conversation with an invisible person," as we walk down the street. And I suddenly realized, like, I used to do this when I was a kid, like to try and give it voice. And I always like the sounds of different words and how they, like it's my grandmother had this phrase, because she's from South Wales, which was yucca-vee. Like yucca-vee. And I always used to love that, just how it sounded in my mouth, and how perfectly it described what she was talking about. So I've always had that. And it's interesting, I think your childhood is a double-edged sword, because it's where your magic is, but it's also where you pick up a lot of your kind of limiting beliefs and limitations. Some of my school reports, and there are things, Morag lacks imagination, or her vocabulary could be stronger and everything. And obviously I'd picked it up and decided, oh, I'm not obviously very creative. I can read a book and I could analyze a book, but maybe I wouldn't be able to write one. And it's funny how you embed those things and you have to shed them a bit later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a perfect description of it, that double-edged sword, because like you say, in the same space as all that wonder and excitement and just doing what you love, and that without any conditioning, it is the age where we also start to pick those up, and those stories that we're told we believe. I'm not creative, I'm not imaginative, whatever those stories are, and we hold on to them as the truth for so many years. And I love the Welsh connection, because I grew up in Wales. So yucca-vee is one of my favourite Welsh expressions, and so many other words in Welsh actually are so beautiful. So one of my, and I'm sure you'll know this, is cwtch. Which
want a bit of a cwtch.
Want to have a cwtch, and the literal translation is like a cuddle, but it's so much more than that. It's a safe space. And you may do this for your little ones, but if my children are ill, I make them a cwtch, which is, it's not just me giving them a cuddle, it's all the soft blankets and the cushions and everything they might need, so they're safe and loved and cared for. And cariad is another beautiful Welsh word that again means darling, I think, by literal, but there's so much more to it. So love all those Welsh words, and yucca-vee is just brilliant. And my kids say it now. They never really, never lived in Wales, but because they've heard me say it, yucca-vee is kind of a great description. So it's amazing. So what does storyteller mean for you now? What now you've owned it. Now you've said, I am a storyteller. How's that showing up? What are you doing with that?
So now it is about this next stage of actually sharing it with more people. And it's accepting it and building into my routine. I've had to do a lot of reprogramming, because I've come from corporate, and creative work is different, and it comes in different energies, and you to stop the kind of oh gosh, it's 8:10 and I'm not at my desk kind of thing. So it's for me, it's been an entire change in paradigm of how I'm going to work and what I'm interested in, and an ability to just be curious. That's what's great about being a storyteller. Like this story on legacy that I've been working on, it came because I had stories in my head, and this is what normally happens. I've got little bits, and I did with this one as well. I had this little thought, a seedling of an idea, and I didn't know what to do with it. And that's been a really big learning for me, because to not just try and get straight into productivity, to let that just sit and like, okay, it's not ready yet, it's not right. And then I was on a call, like a mastermind call, and somebody else started talking about legacy, and I was like, that's it. That is how I thread this story with this story with this story with this story. Your amount of faith that you have to have that it's still going to be there. Like I had this moment, like I did that last lockdown reading, and then somebody messaged me and said, when's the next one? And I thought, oh, Christ, it just took me 8 months to write. Like, when do you know? And now I'm coming into March and I'm like, oh, okay, like I've got one that now has a nice little theme to it, has 3 pieces that would work really well. So this next iteration for me is sharing that, but also I'm finding that in my writing, and this is what's really powerful, I think, with anybody, if they write, even if it's journaling and they just do it for themselves, you start to discover the themes that matter to you. You start to see your own language. And I realized how optimistic I am, and how one of, you know, when you do those personality profiling and talent profiling things, and they come back and they try and tell you how you are, and you normally look at them and go, I'm not like that at all. But, you know, you have that immediate adverse reaction, don't you? Like, don't tell me what I'm like. But there was a line in it, and for my kind of personality type, it says, delights in changing the wheels on a moving car. And all of my work at the moment is about, how can we change the world? How can we change the cultural paradigm that we're in? And the more I come back to it, the more I'm like, it is within us. You know, we keep looking, we keep doing these courses, teach me more. And I think that's great. Like, I'm a lifelong learner. I love it. But there is a point where you have to trust yourself and trust your voice, and, you know, and have faith that it's right. This is the biggest journey that I'm on now, is to sort of say, yes, I'm a storyteller. Not 100% sure what the next step is, but I know I'm going to help other people find their voice. I know I want to put more of my work out, because I really believe in this idea that words and ideas can change the world. The more we hear different perspectives, or the more that we hear the perspective we've always had in our head but have never heard voiced, and then we realize, not just me that thinks that. That's how we make the change.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that permission sometimes that somebody else needs to voice their beliefs, which may be very different. You know, your story might surface a belief that's different, but actually it's more around, I can say it, I can, you know, how can I put it out there in the world? And I think one thing that you said there that I like to talk about, the creative process in everything that we do. And I think, you know, all of us have the opportunity to be creative, whether we're storytellers, writers, running businesses, working in corporates even, and we've lost that creative process. And some of it, as you said, that you captured there really beautifully, was around that having faith that we won't lose something, that paradigm that we live in, that everything has to be productive. So as soon as something appears, we have to do something with it. And I think part of the creative process, as you say, is lessening our control over it, is just letting it go, knowing and trusting that it will come back. And often, as you say, something else happens where you go, oh, okay, now I get why I didn't do anything with it, because now this makes sense and I can thread this in. And I think that's something that is really interesting for people who are not working in what are the traditional creative professions, to tap into, to trust that the ideas don't have to be birthed straight away, that trusting they will come back to us because there's something that we know, but they'll come back when they're ready. We were talking just before we came on air, if you like, about, you know, the seasons, is that it's a seasonal thing sometimes. You know, your walks where all these ideas are going on in your head, that's the winter time. It's not productive, you're not writing it down, you're not creating it, you're not editing it, but it's actually where it forms, where that seed starts to grow. And I think that's something that's really exciting about the creative process, but can also be quite challenging for people, because it's not the norm. It's not how we're used to producing things. It's less linear, but is so exciting when you can embrace it, whether you're a storyteller or whether you're creating a business or whether you're creating a community. I think the similarities and the synergies with that are really powerful. And partly why, when I heard when I was there when you performed it, and I can understand you know, why people were asking you about your, you know, your theatrical training, because you delivered it. I'm not going to spoil it, but you delivered it so beautifully, and it really caught my attention. And I wanted to bring it to my audience. I wanted to bring it to people who may not see it otherwise, may not hear it, may not hear that voice. Storytelling is something that is more, it seems to be more prevalent now. But I think, as like so many of these things, there is a storytelling, and there is, as Kate would like to say, you know, sharing your wild voice.
Yeah.
There's this sort of constructed sort of storytelling, and then there's this, what's the story we really want to tell? I think that's what you do so, you know, brilliantly in this story particularly. So before I invite you to share that, is there anything else that you want to share with people about how it feels for you? Because I'm really keen that we have your beautiful story, and then we don't really say much afterwards, because I really want it to land with people, and that to be what they go away with. So but before we do that, is there anything else that you think is relevant to share?
I think it's a really interesting point that you made about storytelling feeling like it's becoming more prevalent, and storytelling we know has been the you know, yonks, it's what we do as human beings. And I think that's what I noticed as well, and quite a lot of what this story is about is we are all pretty consummate storytellers. The stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that we use to justify things, and it's a really great power and a hindrance if we get onto that the negative side of this is just something that's not possible for me, or like it's not acceptable to do it that way, and we tell ourselves that story so well that it feels like the truth. Like, and this is where this coming back to analyzing, why do I think that's true? And I think that's always been, even in my corporate life, when I worked, like I say, I worked almost like a fixer. I usually, at the point in which people, when we just do it this way, you'll always hear that in a business, it's just always been done this way, and you'll sort of go, why? They go, it's always been done that way. Like, yeah, but why? And they've told that story to themselves so well, it's the truth, so they can't look to see where they might need to unpick things. And I think that's the part of the storyteller, and everybody, you have to have a healthy love and a healthy distrust for your storyteller. As my storyteller spun me a complete yarn of fiction, and tune into the ones like, yeah, that's fact, right, that's my absolute knowing of the direction that I want to go in. So I'm very big on trying to bring storyteller into, and storytelling into these areas where they wouldn't normally be. And like you say, this creativity cycle, like I'd love it if businesses went, you know, I'm going to have I have them, what I call rabbit hole afternoons, where it's just like, there's no point to this afternoon, I'm just going to pursue what's of interest to me. I'm going to go to an art gallery when you can like, I'm going to go to an art gallery, I'm going to walk down the beach. And I'd love it if you could get into a situation where it's fully acceptable to say that in your office. And I've spoken about this before with Sarah Price as well, who runs Action, and she says the same thing, this requirement to have productive rest, and that faith that in rest good ideas come.
I'm reading I've started reading an amazing book that speaks to this as well, from the Do range of books, which often it's not about doing, but actually the Do range, and they've got one called Pause, You're Not a To-Do List, you know, which is so true. And actually it talks about this, creating this pause to not do anything, but actually in that space of doing nothing, so much comes, but we don't allow ourselves, we cram it full of time. And part of storytelling actually is that sense of, you know, we used to pause and stop and listen to stories, and really listen to just hear, and then see what happens, you know, that magic of storytelling, that can get lost with the kind of, there's a purpose to telling this story, you know, that we can see in the corporate world, and that's, you know, when I said about storytelling becoming more prevalent, it seems to be more prevalent in the corporate space, but it still has that element of it as well. It does something rather than it just being the experience of hearing a story and letting your mind wander as to where that may take you. So
it's still that last shift in the paradigm, isn't it, of like, sometimes it can feel like it's being used manipulatively, you know, like I've worked out the psychology of how story works, So now I'm going to use it and we can see right through it. That's where you have to find what Kate, like Kate says, the wild voice. If a wild voice is speaking to you, it's not manipulative. It can't be. It's authentic. But I think that is such a shame, like you say. And Liz Gilbert, when you read her work in Big Magic, she captures this great thing about I write my words and I put them out there, and after that, your reaction is not my responsibility. It can't be. And that's what I notice the most is, you know, as a writer, you write it thinking, I kind of want to steer people on a bit of a journey, right? I don't want to make it so think, where the hell am I? Like, this is just discombobulating. Like, what are you trying to say to me? So you do have a bit of a structure. Like, I want to land this point, or at least want to make you think about here. But always people will come back and be like, well, I hadn't, you know, this is the thing that caught my attention. And you think, God, like, I think that was my throwaway line when I was like, it was like a link line or something. And that's the one they've picked up on. And so that's a joy as well. And I think there is a bit about, in this paradigm of storytelling from an authentic place, it also ties in really nicely with collaboration. You know, like, my work is given out to you and you receive it however you want, you know, and I don't use it to manipulate.
I think that's beautiful. And so much, if we think less of what other people are going to say about what we're putting out, it actually gives us that ability to put out exactly what we feel without that responsibility for how it's going to be perceived, because we have no control over that. And that's the beauty of it. Actually, you just put your work out there and then you see how people perceive it. So that seems like a really good lead into just letting you speak. And thank you so much for sharing this with us. And it's been a delight having you here today. So thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Masks and myths. As she reaches the sliding doors, she remembers, stops, looks around apprehensively, nervously. Judging eyes are on her. Needs must, she thinks to herself, hand in pocket, nothing. Overladen handbag is swung around from back to front and furiously rummaged through until, at last, she finds it, her favourite mask. Triple cotton, layered for best protection, that's what the label said. She remembers, because it reminded her of a feminine hygiene ad. Deed done, her mouth and nose covered, she is finally free to enter the supermarket. Eyes no longer on her, her compliance has rendered her safe from the shaming of strangers. 4 aisles in, and a realization dawns that this mask has its perks as she eye flirts outrageously with the hunk in milk and dairy. Unencumbered by identification worries, unbothered by her lack of makeup, covered and unknowable, she begins to feel a freedom, a superhero with an invisibility cloak kind of freedom. Her pace quickens, the trolley wheels clunk, 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 until optimum speed is reached. She leans on the handle, raises her feet from the ground, and glides past the tinned peaches. 5 seconds to regress from 45 to 5, for the whole world, including the supermarket, to become her playground. Why was I so down on this at the door? She ponders. Then, reality. A small child, an actual one this time, runs past deep into the busy aisle, throws himself on the floor, and tantrums like no tantrum seen before. An impressive performance that sprays his emotions out for all to witness. She feels a pang of jealousy. He is unmasked and unconstrained. Not so for his harassed and horrified mother, who can do nothing to stop this show, and so bows her head down, eyes to the floor, and repeats, "I'm sorry, gosh, I am so sorry. I am very sorry, I'm sorry," like a tape stuck in an old worn hi-fi. She tries to meet this mother's eyes, smile, let her know it's fine, that she understands, that she's been there, but her words are muffled and her body language lost in mass translation. And so the mother stands alone, an island in a sea of mask-tutting, eye-rolling disapproval, unable to identify the invisible bridge of empathy that could have connected her to an ally and safe haven. Performance over, the weekly shop dulls back to its mundane routine, soulless, airless, until finally it is done. She exits back through the sliding portal doors, whipping the mask off as soon as she can, to free herself from its suffocations and to taste the cool, sunshine-filled fresh air. Our masks today are visible, physical, tangible. We wear them for safety for others and ours, yet we know instinctively that despite their merits, they are flawed, transitory, something that should ultimately be removed. But what of our invisible masks, the ones we wear daily and never take off? How much are they suffocating us? Myths began as a way to pass down wisdom from elders to youngers, from those who did know to those who did not. They told the history of something, explained a natural or social phenomenon. They were, in essence, grounded in truth. Embellished, yes, as all stories are, to make them memorable and understandable, but done so for safety, because that's what ancient wisdom, passed down, ultimately is, an attempt to keep a loved one safe, like a tangible mask in a pandemic. When based in truth, a myth is a wonderful thing, a handy reminder of when to apply caution and for how long. Shepherds and their red skies. But what of the other myths, the widely held but false ones, the invisible ones? We know them even if we haven't really thought about them much. The perfect body, the perfect marriage, the perfect home, the perfect family, the perfect lover, the perfect job. Very all-inclusive is your perfect myth. Success brings happiness. Great art is born through great suffering. In order to win, someone must lose. These myths are everywhere, and we wear them daily. In every smiling, I'm fine, thanks, when we're dying inside. In every, yes, yes, of course, I've got the time, crumbling of boundaries. They are in every judgment of another when we overlay the myth of our rightness, the myth that there is only one right way, and please God, let it be my way, because otherwise I'm wrong and I've fucked up and I've failed and I'm not perfect, and then what happens? What will that mean for me and my safety? That is, after all, why these false myths permeate so well. Their aim is the same as the true myths, the alleviation of fear and the securing of safety. The greatest lies are the ones told so close to the truth. And so we gather up our myths in our invisible masks and we wear them tight. We hold on to the fleeting moments of eye flirtation in aisle 4 and the playful trolley glide past the canned goods, thinking, believing, hoping that these brief moments of joy are proof that our masks work and that the fake myth may in fact be true. We pick them up so young that we don't even remember that we stopped apprehensively at the door, unsure we wanted to put them on in the first place. And we never take them off to know and feel the sweet relief and freedom of the fresh, clean air. I wonder what would happen if every day when we take off our physical masks, we try to willingly shed some of our invisible ones. What if we played myth like we used to play I Spy as kids? Like when your mate says, no, it's totally fine. I mean, after all, nothing in life that's good is easy. And you gently put your hand on hers and call myth. Or when you prepare Christmas dinner and burn the turkey and your inner voice declares that that's it, the whole of Christmas is ruined, and you catch yourself, whisper under your breath, myth. And when you see the kids tease and say, boys don't wear pink, you smile, look them straight in the eye and say, myth. Over the weeks, you lift the veil of invisibility lightly, kindly, playfully, by spotting and calling out all the myths, until you can stand back and laugh at the sheer ridiculousness of the volume of it all the myths you have carried, all the invisible masks you have worn, and in finally seeing them and symbolically removing them, you realize you have blown apart the limitations that had previously bound and suffocated you. I'll start. You have to do it all on your own. Myth. People don't change. Myth. Weapons are more powerful than words. Myth. Your voice and your actions won't make a difference. Myth. Your turn.